everyone, and welcome to School Psych Chat's GASP Edition, the podcast dedicated to all things school psychology in the great state of Georgia. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to School Psych Chat's GASP Edition. I'm your host, Kylah Pollard, and I'm excited to bring you this podcast on behalf of the Georgia Association of School Psychologists, or GASP, as we like to call it. GASP is a professional organization representing school psychologists in the state of Georgia. It serves as a resource and advocate for its members, promoting the field of school psychology and promoting the well-being and academic success of students. So let's get started. Before we start today's topic, I wanted to provide a brief update on our advocacy efforts in the state of Georgia. House Bill 81, which is the Interstate Compact for School Psychologists, was approved by the Georgia Senate's Education and Youth Committee. It has now gone to the Senate Rules Committee for consideration, so we'll continue to keep you updated on that bill's progress. Today, we will be answering a very important question. What is a school psychologist? To help with this, please welcome GASP President Rachel Greenlee and Dr. Catherine Perkins, who is a Georgia State University school psychology professor and is the GASP Parliamentarian. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
So in 30 seconds or less, can you tell us what a school psychologist is and what it is that they do?
School psychologists fill a very big role in our schools. They have training and expertise in child development, learning, data analysis, and database decision making. And that really helps them to be able to partner with their schools and districts to engage in a problem-solving process for students from the beginning of Tier 1, where all students can benefit from best practices and differentiated instruction and supporting the work of teachers in the classroom, all the way to designing individualized plans for student success, be that through general education or special education, to help students receive the level of support they need to be successful. And we do that for behavior, social learning, social skills, and mental health, as well as academics.
Very nice job. Did you time that?
No, I did not.
30 seconds.
Yes.
Oh, that was awesome.
I was sitting here timing it and I'm like, holy cow, she must have practiced that.
I didn't. This is the first time it's come out of my mouth.
Yay,
Nice
good
job.
job. School psychology is a specialized area within the broader field of psychology, and our focus as school psychologists is assisting students, parents, teachers in the area of academics and education. And so we are primarily interested in things related to learning, environments that facilitate learning, barriers to learning, and all of the components of the school setting that facilitate learning or might, again, be a barrier to learning. So towards that end, our job is to work with educators, including administrators, teachers, support staff, to facilitate the learning for students in our schools. And then to also work with stakeholders such as parents and community members who are working with children and students to support their learning in schools.
Very nice. Very well done. Right around 30 seconds. Good job. Okay, so whenever I tell people that I'm a school psychologist, the number one thing I hear, first of all, is, oh, can you read my mind? And I'm like, no, that's no. But then the next thing I hear is, oh, so you're a school counselor. I go, no, not quite. So can y'all tell us what the difference is between school psychologists and school counselors?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kylah. We are often, people think that school psychologists and school counselors are one and the same, when in fact, in a school setting, they have very unique and different roles. So school psychologists, while we work to, create behavior, social emotional plans, and supports for students, and we can and are qualified to provide counseling in small group, individualized counseling, and that sort of support. In many school districts across our state, we are utilized in a more evaluative role. So we spend a good bit of our time doing individualized psychoeducational evaluations to determine disability status. We also do a variety of other things in consultation and support, but the direct work of providing intervention in the counseling area usually lies with the school counselors. They provide guidance lessons to our students at the younger grades. And then as they get into the secondary grades, they really have a focus on that academic advisement piece, which is so critical to help our students graduate. And so a lot of times the services we provide in a school district are going to work kind of in tandem with one another. So we really kind of join forces to make sure that we are meeting all the needs of the whole child, but we sort of divide and conquer and each take a piece of that to make sure that students are supported. And we also work in collaboration with social workers in terms of the mental health and resources and that family partnership with the school district so that they can get the outside services and supports that they need as well.
I would just add to what Rachel said. I think school psychologists, school counselors, and school social workers are all school-based mental health providers. And so people do get confused about the specific roles for each one and the background and training. And so, I would just add that the background and training and the focus of the work is slightly different for each one of those school-based mental health providers. And so generally speaking, school social workers, for example, are focused on that homeschool connection, on making sure that those of us who are in educational environments have a sense of the context that the child's coming from and are able to have an understanding of that context and facilitate communication back and forth between school and home. Because we know we have plenty of data that supports the fact that just helps kids learn, and that's what we're all about. School counselors have a primary focus in helping students when they run into typical life challenges, things that are common and expected and for whatever reason might be a stumbling block for any given child. And so in that situation, that's really where the school counselor's background and training comes in. It's more about general life adjustment to common life challenges. Yeah. And like, for example, the divorce in a family or the death of a grandparent or those kinds of things that we think of as being typical experiences as opposed to something that might be a little more atypical. And then school psychologists' mental health background and training is a little more focused on areas that are not as typical in terms of life adjustment, things that might be a little more involved in terms of clinical concern. And so those might be something that started as kind of an adjustment issue might progress and continue and be chronic enough that it elevates to the level of a different level of concern. And that's really where your school psychologist steps in. And so because of that, our training is a little more focused on elements of mental health that might lead to being problematic for learning, as opposed to what school counselors do, which is kind of more helping with adjusting to a life situation.
That's a great way to think about it, Catherine. And I'm glad you brought that up in terms of when student needs, in terms of behavior and social emotional adjustment, become impacted more so in terms of their daily functioning at school, their performance while they're in the educational setting. And that's really a great time when our school counselors will often call on us as school psychologists to say, we have a student that we need support with because this seems to be really rising to the level of perhaps looking at more services for a student because they need some support to be able to meet the standards educationally, behaviorally. And so we really are called in too to guide some of that decision making around levels of support for student success, and then also helping guide teams when we think we may be looking at a condition or a difficulty that's more disabling to a student in an educational environment. And that's where we can really provide support and more targeted interventions kind of at that level of need. That's a great point, Catherine.
Yeah.
And I usually explain it that I can do counseling. I have the ability to do counseling, but typically I just consult with counselors. And so if they need something, they come and get me. Or if they're not available, then I'll work with a student. But I've also been called in, for kids with schizophrenia, for kids with bipolar disorder. They call me because that's not something counselors typically see, just like y'all were talking about, that they deal with a more typical, and that's not something that's typical. A child hearing voices is not typical.
I think too, because of our unique training as school psychologists, we understand typical development versus atypical development and kind of the challenges that all students go through over the course of their education, but really being able, when a student has a more specific need, to really support school teams and be a valuable team member, particularly when it comes to higher level behavioral needs in the classroom. Because I find often that, that's when administrators and teaching staff who are exceptional at what they do, but when they have that sort of kind of urgent, acute need in a school building, sometimes it becomes emotional for people or stressful for people. And so being able to guide them back to a more kind of grounded, data-based way to approach problem solving for that student and putting in supports. So we're able to support our school staffs and walking through that process of determining the correct supports. And also we have that unique perspective to be able to consider the whole child, really all the variables that may influence them. And while others in the school building may consider that or have experiences that lead them to do that, that's really part of our training. And so we're able to kind of see all those pieces and then pull in additional supports to help the school team as needed, kind of given that expertise in that area.
Okay, so we've kind of touched on this, but I'm going to ask it directly. Do school psychologists work with only certain students? That's always how it seems to people who know about school psychology.
No, absolutely not. School psychologists support every single student in that school district, whether that is obvious and apparent to people or perhaps not. I know that, a lot of times parents, once we meet them in person, they say things like, oh, I didn't know that this school district had a school psychologist, or this school had a school psychologist. So they're not even aware of our physical presence or our, presence having that role in a school building and how that is different from a school counselor. But I think a lot of times it's like the parents kind of interface with us or the teachers more directly when they have students who have academic, behavior, mental health needs. However, so we become more visible when we're planning for those students, when we're writing intervention plans, even when we're ultimately evaluating and determining disability status or assisting the team in doing so. So that's a super visible piece of our role. But another, thing that school psychologists routinely do in their districts is help their school teams and even their data or their district level teams in analyzing district level data, and school-based data, how to align interventions accordingly, how to utilize resources to align student need to staffing, to interventions that we have available. So there's a lot that we do in terms of being able to help districts navigate processes, procedures, and in many cases even help develop those to help things really be integrated within the school building in terms of the teams that they already have in place. How can we work more effectively and efficiently and have more integration? And that sort of thing. So there's a lot of background work that I think that we ultimately end up doing and support that we provide really across all the different departments within our district. So whether or not people see us in person and know that we're there, school psychologists are busy serving all of the students in largely support roles.
As school psychologists, we might be more often working one-on-one or in small groups with students. But that being said, our impact covers all students in the school as well as all educators in the school. And so it might be that if I'm in the school building, I'm doing counseling with an individual student or doing an intervention with a small group of students. Instead of doing like classroom lessons, that tends to be more, back to your previous question, like classroom lessons, social skills instruction, those kinds of things will tend to be more in the school counselor's domain. School psychologists will tend to work one-on-one or in small groups with students, but their impact is much broader than that, as Rachel said, because we work along all of the tiers of multi-tiered systems of support. So part of what we do as database decision makers is offer our services to school administrators and teachers in terms of trying to provide a school climate that supports learning and is preventative for any of the challenges to school climate that would interfere with learning.
And I think one of the reasons that people think we only work with certain groups of students is just the shortage of school psychologists and how big our caseloads are. Mm-hmm. You know, I've got quite the caseload, so I don't get to work with all the kids.
Right. And I think too, a lot of variability across the state in the different districts around how many of the different types of services and our whole comprehensive set of school psych service toolkit that we come out with and we're trained with and armed with in our schools. But there's a large degree of variability in which skill sets school psychologists use in their respective districts, because I think a lot of that goes back to, as you're saying, the shortages and our ratios. So the higher your ratio, then, you know, of course, the more challenging it is to do more than evaluate. And so when it's in that type of a district, then they do see you as coming in and working with just specific students, just the most high needs students. But when we're able to, we really can contribute not only at the individual student level, but truly at the school and district level and even beyond, because we understand a lot of what's going on around mental health, around school safety, around literacy, just to name a few of our current state initiatives. And so we're able to have an impact and support the ways that schools can implement best practices as our state continues to improve things and make changes to required instruction and that sort of thing. We're able to help bridge that and then figure out in our school districts how that will look and how we can integrate and move forward. We can provide training, but again, that goes back to how free your time is to be able to contribute in those ways. And so the hope is, of course, as we improve those pieces, then we will be utilized to our full potential and be able to have a broader impact in so many different areas, not only special education, but also general education.
Whenever, there's a school psychology conference, we just had the National Association of School Psychology conference. You see all the pictures of Gumby. Gumby is everywhere. And everybody's talking about school psychologists are like Gumby. Can you tell me why school psychologists like Gumby so much?
Kathy Cowan was a NASP staff member, and many years ago, and she's not a school psychologist, and many years ago, after working in the NASP office for several years, she was like, you guys are just like that little doll, that little Gumby doll. And people started laughing. But, for those in the audience who don't know Gumby, Gumby is a little green, flexible character that's made out of rubber. And so the analogy is that just like Gumby is flexible and adaptable and has a positive outlook on life, school psychologists are flexible and adaptable and have a positive outlook on life. And so we've kind of adopted it as a informal, fun little logo for ourselves. But yeah, it's kind of fun. So that's where it came from historically.
I think it's a great analogy too. But it really is a perfect analogy for us because we are so adaptable. I remember even all the way back in grad school, I remember we said the only thing static about the school setting is that it's dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And so it changes. It's ever changing.
Right.
No 2 days are the same. Literally, you can think your day is going one way and it goes nothing like that in a totally different direction. You may walk into a meeting thinking it's going to go one way and it changes course. And so really we have to be ready to address whatever comes our way to help support anything that, is brought to us and problem solve. And you never know what you're walking into when you walk into a school building and what those needs are that day. And so we have to think on our feet, and we have to be at the ready to problem solve and jump in and help our school teams. So I think it's the perfect analogy for us. We are most certainly a flexible group of folks. We have to be. That's what the job calls for.
Right.
What is the training process for school psychologists?
Well, it's rigorous. That's what I can say. The broad overview is the training in school psychology specifically is just short of a doctoral degree. It's a master's degree, and then in Georgia and in many other states, there's also the requirement of what's called an educational specialist degree. And so what I tell students, because it's an investment, and so I tell students, you're going to spend 2 years immersed in content and academic coursework related to this field. And it's a full schedule that includes summer. So, they start in the fall, they have fall semester, spring semester, summer, and then they go fall semester, spring semester, and graduate with their master's degree. And then following their master's degree, there's still another summer of content and academic coursework. And then their last year in the program, which is their 3rd year in the program, they're on a full-time 1,200-hour internship under the supervision of a credentialed school psychologist at the educational specialist level or higher. So that's roughly, they get the master's degree along the way to the EDS. And then they apply to be credentialed in our state or in another state. So that's kind of how that works.
And I think too, a big piece of that internship, that's so powerful is getting to actually practice the skills under supervision, but really go in with a focus on completing different pieces of the coursework in real time with students. And so through that internship, the requirements include things like doing, a behavior intervention plan and a functional behavioral analysis on a student to help you, write goals and progress monitor. You have to do case studies. There's counseling in small group and individualized. There's academic intervention. So we get a wide range of those pieces that help us so much in the consultation area of our work. And then we also do a vast number of assessments just to make sure that we are ready to really hit the ground running as the job requires of us in Georgia and many other places. And so we become, really skilled at case conceptualization, data analysis, and disability identification through that process. So that internship is such a critical and important piece of our training. And then before that, while we're in the master's program, there is a practicum that we also complete. So that is, a way to really get our feet wet and start to see the practice, in real time that we're also learning about from a theoretical standpoint in class. So it is very rigorous, the amount of research that is learned and reviewed, and, really teaching school psychologists to be critical consumers of research. Like Dr. Perkins said, it's rigorous, but our school psychologists are so well prepared to go out into the field and really jump in and start supporting kids when they're done.
But yeah, like Rachel said, part of that training process, year 1 is kind of a full-time content year, but by year 2, students are spending 2.5 days a week in schools applying what they're learning into real life situations. So school psychology is one of the 4 areas of what's referred to as applied psychology, meaning what we do is purposeful and intentional in helping others. So we're helpers who use data to make decisions about what's going to work. And so every element of our students' training, when they're doing counseling or when they're doing academic interventions or social behavioral interventions, one of the things I tell them is everything you do is an intervention. So you need to have baseline data and outcome data so you can determine whether or not you're spending your time in an effective manner. There's not enough of us out there in our state and in many, many states across the country. It's not unusual for one school psychologist to have 2 schools, for example, or maybe even 3 schools or 4 schools. So I think, it's imperative really that we think of ourselves as scientists and that we're always looking at, is this an effective use of my time? Is this actually helping this child? Is this intervention actually improving classroom behavior for all the students in the class? Is this intervention improving school climate? Like everything we do, we evaluate because we want to make sure it's an effective use of our time and of other people's energy as well. So students start learning that really early. They start learning how to evaluate effectiveness in that first year of their training. And then while they're in their practicum and then certainly their internship year, they're continuing to hone their skills, not only in the work of being a school psychologist, but in the evaluation of whether or not interventions are effective or not effective.
I think that school psychologists can be really useful in terms of program evaluation, determining if certain resources are effective and yielding the desired outcomes. I mean, there's so many ways that we apply the skill set that, that we are trained in to just so many different scenarios that are helpful to a school district. And I think one of our other roles that we've sort of alluded to, but haven't talked a ton about, is kind of the education piece that we do, the teaching piece. I think there's a lot of parts of our job and with different student needs that we encounter that a lot of our teachers or even administrators don't necessarily have a lot of experience or background with. So we serve as that bridge to help school staff, but also families understand student needs and the ways that we can best support them. So I think that's really one of the things that I love most about our job, is that truly our sole goal and focus is on doing what's best for students. We have no other agenda other than to support our students. And so we get to do that while thinking through the child in totality as a whole from every aspect, considering all the contextual variables that affect them, and then designing a plan for that student or that group of students or even that classroom that can support students meeting social emotional goals and the teacher being able to teach effectively in a climate that is safe, that is stable and healthy and positive. So we really are able to help support all pieces of that. And it's really one of the most kind of rewarding pieces, I think, is when you see that direct impact that we get to have. So yeah, we definitely are teachers in our role in terms of the support we provide to our school teams and families.
Also, the intensity of grad school is very helpful because you're getting a crash course in multitasking, in time management, in
working under pressure.
And, okay, I'm done with this. Now I have to move on to the next thing. I remember my first year, I had 18 hours between the end of spring semester and the beginning of Maymester. And I was like, I'm just going to sleep the entire 18 hours. And I didn't. I binge watched Gilmore Girls.
Yeah, there are times in grad school where you think your eyeballs are going to pack up and leave from the amount of reading that you are doing. It's very intensive, but I think it is. I mean, you make a funny but great point. I mean, our jobs, they require us to continuously learn, to keep up with research, to keep up with policy, legislation, all the things that can directly impact our work, and help us serve our students and schools more effectively. But, on top of staying abreast of all of those pieces, we are every day dealing with challenges and supporting challenges that our students bring that are so varied every day. No two students are alike, no two student needs are alike. And so, we really have to get all that content because we cover and support a wide range of different types of learners and students. And so to be fully prepared to do that, to think through different language, cultural variables, all the background pieces, it requires a lot of reading and a lot of training. But yes, by the time you're in the field, you are ready to hit the ground running, and you can set your own schedule to be most effective and efficient because you've had good practice for at least 3 years of grad school.
Right. So one last question. What is it that you want the world to know about school psychology?
The thing that comes to mind for me, if I could tell the world one thing about school psychology, is that we are a helping role. We help students get what they need so that they can learn effectively. We help identify variables and help identify barriers, strengths and weaknesses that help in the classroom so that the teacher can be able to teach effectively. And so we really can provide support at all levels, from tier 1 instruction in the classroom all the way through special education, identification and evaluation. And so we do a lot, we can do a lot, and we want to be utilized as team members to help support the ever-changing needs of our student population. So there are just never enough hours in the day.
Well, that's funny that you said that, because what came up for me is that we're helpers. That's what I would want people to know. Several years ago, a former GASP president had a theme for his year, and it was, "I'm a school psychologist and I'm here to help." And that really is true. That's who we are. We want things to run smoothly for administrators, teachers, and schools, and the students that are in them. And so that's a huge part of who we are as a profession. Our goal is to help others. And I would just add to that we do that in a range of ways. And I would want people to know that as helpers, we use a problem-solving model. And so we try to look at a problem, we try to figure out what is the piece of the problem that's causing the challenge right here. And we do that, we determine exactly what the problem is by listening to others, by collecting data, by evaluating the data, looking at the data, and then by coming up with generating ideas and solutions and trying to make sure those ideas and solutions are things that are acceptable and workable for that teacher, that administrator, that parent that's trying to help their child. So it's a rewarding profession, and it's one that I think, because there are so few of us in schools, people don't recognize as much what we do. But I wouldn't want to do anything else. I'm grateful it's the job that I've had for the last few years. So,
it's funny. I remember in graduate school, but it's about school psychologists or the Lone Rangers of education.
That's Dr. Myers.
Yeah, and he shared that, and truer words have never been spoken.
True.
Because we do in a lot of ways. It's like we come in, we can help. We're doing a lot of behind the scenes type of work that isn't as obvious and apparent to everyone or as visible, but helping support the work of the school and of the teacher. And then it's like we ride away off into the sunset and nobody's quite sure how it happened or what, but we've seen improvements, we have improved outcomes, those sorts of things. And so and that's the thing. Most school psychologists that I know, not all, but many, they're not the most outgoing and, center of attention type people. They really just want to come in and help. And whatever that looks like, and we're happy to do it. And then, when we're needed, we come support. And we just want to be a resource. I think that's the biggest thing. When you are in a district that will utilize you as a resource and use your expertise to help support their students, that's a good place to be.
Very well said, both of y'all. All right. Thank you so much for being here today, y'all. This has been a wonderful and informative conversation. So everybody join us next time, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
That's all for today's School Psych Chat. Thanks for listening. To keep the conversation going, follow us at GASP Online, and don't forget to like and subscribe this podcast. Talk to you next time.